Oh, wow. Say hi.
Hey. I told you you'd like this way.
Oh, wow.
It's been meant to be.
Tennessee is gorgeous.
Yeah, you can see all out through here. It's must have been meant to be.
The stereotype is deliverance.
But see, that's not true.
Exactly. And it is a disservice.
The outside world gets to these people, but really they are the backbone of this side of the country. You know, they were the people who had guts enough to go out and go past where it was already civilized and come out into where it was rough and tough, and now it's, just a whole different world,
And then you see like these gentrified neighborhoods with like this shack in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and you look at these older people, or their kids sold out.
Yeah.
They held on to this 200 acres for, forever that they bought for,
oh, wow.
$75 an acre. Look at that. That's neat, ain't it?
Oh, it is.
It is breathtaking out here.
It's interesting because when you talk to people and they talk about the gentrification of like cities and neighborhoods, like the gentrification of Harlem is a flashpoint topic. People came in, they bought these houses, and then they wanted to shut down the drumming that's been going on in the square since like the 50s. And so people hear that, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about the gentrification of the mountain communities.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. And then you have these few families who had a bunch of acreage and had big families, and they, I guess, had a vision of all this tourism and all this stuff. And, like the Ovals and the Fairbrights, and there's like 4 or 5 different families in Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge and stuff that had this. And now they're, they want everybody to bow down to them, but their, forefathers were just regular mountain people just out here making a living, just doing,
Yeah. I think the idea is that the tourism will give the mountain people jobs, but I don't think that is actually what happens.
See, and that's not what happens. They build all these hotels, where it's happening. You got all these Indian people. Indians are getting they own the hotels now, and see, the people who did own the hotels are selling out and leasing them to these foreigners, and all that money is going out of the country.
Okay, so it's not staying.
It's terrible. And what you see, and you see, and I understand anybody wanting to better themselves, but you have an influx of these Mexicans and Hondurans and all this, to where our wages aren't going up. They're staying the same. Right?
Yeah, because businesses can get away with paying less.
Yeah, because they can pay these people under the
Which isn't good for them either, because they come here for the American dream. They come here for the good wages, and then they're saddled with these low wages because they're foreigners.
5 families in a house.
Yeah, but they shouldn't have to. I think that's the thing.
No, they shouldn't. They should have, and the American way is a single family home.
Yeah. I mean, it's if you want to have multiple families in a house, that's one thing. But, you see a lot. When I lived in California, I lived in a Hispanic side of town. And in Mexico, they did not live multiple families in a house. They would live with grandma, but it wasn't like that. But then they would come here with this idea that they would come here and they could send their kid to college and, get a great education and have a great job. And they get here, and the only work they can get is picking something in a field.
But see, over here, they get in the hotel industry, in the construction field, so they are, and it's the same as picking something, same as picking something in the field, more or less, but they are, what gets me is they're taking on the attitude like we are dummies. family out.
Yeah.
You know, because I always kept my family straight. You know, 'cause my mom, she's got several rental properties, and she's getting older and stuff. They like moved in on her. I love mom to death, but I keep telling her, you know, you didn't do that with me. Why do you let these people do it?
Yeah.
You know, you told me, you know, your ass is gonna get a job, your ass is gonna work, your ass is gonna take care of yourself. But yeah, my nieces and nephews and all their kids, you're gonna let congregate there. You know,
Wow.
Isn't that neat?
That is gorgeous.
See, it must have been.
I mean, coming from Northern California, I have seen some stunning country, but this is on par with what I see in Northern California. Like, there are people in Northern California that are very snobbish about how beautiful, like, Tahoe and higher up it is. And frankly, this is stunning. I can't imagine working with brick that old.
Oh,
you know, you touch it wrong and it crumbles.
I mean, and for me, you know, to where something like that means something.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you know, if I get the slightest bit off,
you're breaking something that's really old and really special.
You know, and I'm thinking about somebody's hands years ago, putting this stuff together. You know,
because they really did. I mean, every single one of those bricks was laid by hand. It's not like they went up on a crane and just plastered it together. And I do love how North Carolina has taken those old mills and is repurposing
this is South
them.
Carolina. South Carolina.
Oh, that was in South Carolina.
Yeah, I work in South Carolina.
Okay, so they're doing it too. Is that something that's happening all up and down the river to the different? Because I know like some of these areas were like big cotton mill areas. And stuff.
See, South Carolina was mainly, I mean, like back in slavery times was cotton. That's what South Carolina did. You know, it had the big plantations and that's.
Yeah. My best friend, he owns a plantation that used to have the last name of my last name. That was awkward.
Last name?
Good. So we used to joke that his family might have owned my family. Awkward.
You know, what gets me by is people who, like, still hold, like, me accountable. I mean, I'm from up north, so I'm sure my family didn't have any slaves. I mean, just because I'm white, you hold me accountable. Had nothing to do with nothing. You know?
Well, I think coming from the other side of the fence. I think coming from the other side of the fence, it's a little easier for me to understand because, like, I'm a black person who grew up in a white family who has spent time in both sides. So when I approach the subject, I can literally understand both sides of it. I can understand how it feels to have that on you. But at the same time, I think that a lot of the issues nowadays do descend from that. So even though it happened a long time ago, the institution around it has affected people to this day. And so I think what happens is a lot of times when black people talk about that, they aren't necessarily talking about it as a personal blame. Like, there is some people need some personal blame. Like, there are some racist assholes out there. But I think what they're talking about is the institutional stuff.
Racist. And I tell you what, some of the most racist black people I ever met are like 50-year-old, 60-year-old black women who
Oh, yeah.
church.
I went into a gas station and they wouldn't talk to me. I was too late, and these women in this old gas station would not talk to me because of my skin color. They were old black women and they would not talk to me. I was not dark enough to be talked to. But I think, it's one of these questions where how do you fix the institutional racism without assigning personal blame? And how do you accept that you have privilege without feeling guilty for that privilege? Saying I have privilege isn't saying it's my fault for having privilege, it's acknowledging my privilege. Like my daughter, she's mixed, and she very rarely is noticed as being black. And she's had to really...
As light as you are, I imagine.
She's usually, people think she's Arab or Mexican or Italian or just white with a tan. And so she's had to deal with, on a very personal level, this recognition that she has more privilege than her brother does. She can do things that her brother cannot do. She does not have the same concerns he has walking in the world over cop pulls her over.
And see,
that's
me too,
really deep.
because there is so, and I didn't realize that because I'm so open-minded and I grew up in the city and freaking with, you know, I was born in freaking East Baltimore where there was more black than white.
Mm-hmm.
You know, was where I was born. And so to me, there's, you know, I mean, and I've always, wherever I went, when I moved to Philly and we were in that area, I was still, you know, I didn't look at the color. I look at the person and who they are.
Yeah, and that's something that is really difficult for black people to hear. And this is what's strange. Okay, I remember I dated an old white guy.
Like me out there.
There's a lot of them. I was dating this guy who was 19 years older than me, and one time he said he was colorblind, and I jumped all down his neck. Because to me, saying that you're colorblind is saying I don't acknowledge how you are in this world. Because my color affects every day how I have to act in this world. And so when I'm not recognized as being black, it actually feels as if a huge part of my personal identity is being ignored. But that's something that you don't understand unless you have intimately talked with somebody about the subject. And frankly, these are subjects people don't talk about.
Yeah, they like to keep hush-hush.
Yeah, they keep it hush-hush because they're afraid of blame. White people are afraid of being blamed. Black people are afraid that they're going to find out their best friend is racist. You know?
Like with me being Jewish, my last name is Bergman, and I'm German and Jewish. It's, you know, we were put down.
Yeah.
Back in the day. You know, back in the day when they were coming over to Ellis Island and everything, we were looked down on, we were put down. And, you know, the Jewish people, the Jewish race is still, you know, looked down upon.
In a lot of cultures, definitely.
But, you know, I don't, you know, and I don't practice Jewish religion or anything like that, but it's part of my heritage.
Yeah.
You know,
It's an important part of your heritage.
I can't deny, you know.
But a lot of people do. A lot of people, once they've become enough not of whatever it was they came from, they want to assimilate to the dominant culture. And so then you have issues where my daughter, she goes to, you know, a Black Student Union meeting and she feels uncomfortable because she's not sure if she's going to be accepted there.
Yeah. And see, and I can understand the black race is because there is so many people. And in the inner cities, you know,
the whole Flint thing, they still haven't fixed the water. The water's still full of lead.
Yeah, you know.
If that happened in Northern California, that water would have been fixed.
I tell you
it would have been fixed in a week.
If that happened in North Philly, that would be fucking boom, fixed, because that's where all the white people are with money. And I'll tell you what, doing power line work, we turn on the rich white people first. No, hand to God, I tell you. We turn on the rich, and I gotta tell people, no, we'll get to you, and it kills me.
Yeah.
Because I gotta listen to what I'm told. But we turn on the rich neighborhoods first.
Yeah.
It's God's honest truth.
People used to ask me why I lived where I live, and when I was in Northern California, and I used to hate having to explain that I lived there because rich people don't let their schools fall apart. I could not afford to live where I was living. I'm still feeling the financial repercussions of living where I was living, but it was important for my kids to get a good education, and
exactly,
rich people don't let their schools fall apart.
No, and they pay their educators.
It was like sending my kids to private school for free.
They pay their educators.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know
we had teachers at that school.
What they say, there's alumni that fucking give them.
Let me tell you something. We had teachers at the elementary and middle school who had graduated from those schools. That doesn't happen anymore. People leave. They don't come back.
But see, that, I mean, that's true.
But, I mean, this is something that I've learned in this trip because I can have these conversations now without judgment, without snap assumptions. Like last night when I spent the night at that guy's house and he had a Confederate flag flying in his living room. Like, it didn't bother me because I was accepting him as he was. And he opened up, and he's like probably the most not racist person I've ever met. Like, he's beat up.
Those people don't understand that. It's just that's a family tradition.
Yeah.
They don't even understand what that.
And the thing is, I understand it. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. And I can respect their feelings about it, and I can respect his emotions around it, and I can respect how he talked about it.
Did he understand that the Confederate flag back then represented the states who wanted slavery? Did he get to that point? That is what, to me, that's what flag means.
Yeah, that's what it means to me too.
I mean,
getting to the point,
they were fighting.
They were fighting for slavery, and to me, it's also being proud of a cessation of a country that you say you love. When I see it flown next to the American flag, it seems like a contradiction to me. Yeah. But that's my personal feelings on it.
To secede from
and so now I'm at the point where I can have that conversation with somebody, and I can say, I believe differently, you believe differently. That doesn't make you a bad person. Right. And I could not have done that before this hitchhiking trip. There's no way in hell, no, I could not have done it. I was angry.
Like real down. Like,
let me tell you,
like myself,
I used to have panic attacks when I would see a Confederate flag.
Really?
Yeah, I was really, really afraid of them. There were some kids over where I grew up that had them. They were not good kids. And to me, it was a symbol of racism. And I used to get panic attacks the same way I would get if I walked down the street and saw a skinhead.
And to me, it is. And skinheads are way worse.
Yeah.
They hate everybody.
But then I met some non-racist skinheads, and that was a trip. I walked across the street in San Francisco, and I had no idea what was going on, because I'm clueless at 19. I was like totally clueless. A friend like grabs my arm and pulls me back, and a bunch of racist skinheads were about ready to fight a bunch of non-racist skinheads in the middle of the street. They were in two lines ready to go for it, and I walked right in the middle of it like an idiot. Yeah.
They could have just converged on you.
Exactly. And the thing that made me change my mind.
Each other. Let's just get her.
The thing that made me change my mind about the man last night was we walked into a gas station, and there was a young black transgender woman behind the counter, and you could tell she'd had a really bad day. And I watched how he spoke to her, and he was so kind and considerate of her. And when one of the other customers kind of looked at her funny, he like totally like nudged the conversation in a different area for her benefit. And when we left, he says, you know, she gets a lot of shit in that store, but she's a good person. And I was like, whoa, there's more here than stereotypes. People are not the internet. They're not the comment section of YouTube and Facebook.
See, social media kind of...
It allowed people to just speak out their ass.
Yeah, be assholes, actually.